All right, how's it going, everybody? And welcome to the first episode of a series I think I'm just going to call Minecraft Explained. And today's, well, on the first episode here, I'm going to explain moss farming. Automated moss farming. We're going to talk about how moss farms work. And I'm going to show you what I've been working on. I've been working on some moss farming stuff for the better part of a week. We are here in my creative world. And as you can see, there's quite a few things happening here. We're just going to go over the basic concepts of farming moss. So as an example, to start off with, I'm pretty sure this is a 7x7. No, that's a 9x9. Okay, so if I just make a 7x7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. I've just some stone here, because we will also talk about stone generators in this video also, because they are a big part of farming moss and moss related things. But cool. And I got a moss block, that in the center here, which is very similar to the setup I've got over here. I got some bone meal. Now when you bone meal a moss block, it can go up to a 7x7 range. You can convert these stone blocks in a 7x7 area. It doesn't always do 7x7 though. So if you see, we didn't get the full 7x7 area. I just take that moss carpet off, I bone meal it again. You see it comes out to here, but it won't go out any further. So if I just add another row of stone here, shouldn't come out to these edges here. Okay, get that moss carpet off. For bone meal again, take that off. More bone meal. Moss carpet on there. I think this is explaining everything I kind of wanted to explain pretty well. You see, it's staying within this 7x7 area. But what I've done, and what I kind of came to a conclusion was a little bit better with just some real basic testing, is if I do a 5x5, 3, 4, 5, 5. I found in some of my own testing that a 5x5 area was just generally a little bit better. Let me just reset time here. I got a much more consistent spread. Most of these blocks were being turned into moss, which is what I want. As you can see, the vast majority of this 5x5 has been turned into moss. If I meal it again, that's all that 5x5 has been turned into moss. So that's kind of why I went for a 5x5 stone platform. So I've got to remember where I put it, because I've been working on quite a few things here. Let's just very quickly talk about stone generation. Okay. So here's just a single segment of the stone generator I use in this moss farm. So if you don't know, pistons can push up to 12 blocks. So right now this piston's not going to push that bit of stone out because it's reached the push limit. But if I take these 2 blocks off the end, I should be able to push out another one. And then the lava drops down, turns that flowing water into stone, and then I push that up. Then I can push that out. Bring that back down. Let the lava flow. Generate a new stone block that I can then push out. But I'm already at the push limit, so we're not going to do that. It's not going to push it out any further. But that's just the basic idea of the stone generator. So lava over flowing water is going to create a stone block in this case. Whereas if you have the flowing water come into contact with the lava, it would generate cobblestone. And we don't want cobblestone in our stone slab that we're going to then be turning into moss, because cobblestone does not get converted to moss blocks. So we want to avoid that at all costs. Which means we have to time this particular action pretty well. So I've got to see if I can find it. Is that this one over here? Yes, it is this one. So this one here is not using this stone generator design. It's much simpler stone generator design. But as you can see, I've got like a 12, like 24 tick kind of a clock going on here. Let's take these out. All right, this is not the best example. This was like the first one I kind of whipped together very quickly. And as you can see, the stone generator doesn't work very well here. So we might just skip past this over here. And as you can tell, I've been messing with this for a bit. Got a bunch of different setups here. These ones use that stone generator design here. Just trying to remember. Yeah. So now what we have here. Okay, so this side's the only side that's turned on. So I have an etho hopper clock here. I won't go into details about how this works. I feel like that will be covered in another video at some point, but this is basically going to send those 12 items to this hopper, which will then, you know, push this block over here, and it's just basically a very simple clock. But if I turn this on, we got our water flowing, and then we have our cobblestone being generated, well, our stone being generated, and then being pushed out. And obviously we're getting our moss blocks. But the problem with this though is that I have this large area and we're only getting moss in this small area here. Which means from this one moss block, we're not really converting all the blocks we could potentially convert into moss. So it's not really that efficient. And also the timing on when we bone meal, this is not going to return a surplus of bone meal to us, because I am building a moss farm to use as a bone meal farm to supply other farms, such as a tree farm, maybe an azalea farm, which I definitely want to do a video on how I come up with an azalea farm. But yeah, like the mechanics of farming moss are pretty simple, so this is why I wanted to do the first video of this series on a moss farm, because A, I need a moss farm, and B, I just thought it'd be fun. So yeah, we're kind of taking this stone generator and then we're basically bone mealing a moss block to create moss, and then we're breaking that moss and then we're composting it here. Yeah, as I said, this design here is very inefficient. It wastes a lot of bone meal and you don't get a lot of bone meal back out of it. And then over here, so I kind of went from this to like these smaller 5x5 modules, and these aren't super efficient either. They use too much bone meal. But as an example, I basically have the same hopper clock set up here, but I've got the set to 10 as opposed to 12. This redstone's really messy. This is early development, but it works very much in the same way. I don't think I have any bone meal in here. Hold on. All right, no bone meal. All right, let me just put some bone meal in there very quickly. Yeah, and as you can see, most of the blocks have been converted to moss, which is what I want. But this is also not very efficient, because look at all these moss blocks that are still here, and now we're bone mealing. So we're wasting bone meal. We're not getting the max efficiency out of one piece of bone meal. So I'll just turn that off for now. But yeah, you know, we are getting some bone meal back, but it's not fantastic. And then over here, I basically have the same setup, but I have 2 composters instead of 1. And over here, I have 3 composters instead of 2. I don't know why I was testing stuff like this, but I just did it this way. And basically, it didn't matter how many composters I had, with how all this timing works and the fact I was not getting all of the efficiency out of a single piece of bone meal. All of these with a stack of bone meal in it produced basically the same amount of bone meal coming out of it, which was less than I put into the machine to begin with. What's this one here for? I can't quite remember what I was doing with that one. That's fine. I spent about a week and a half building moss farms, so it's kind of hard to keep track of everything. Yeah, so I kind of have this 5x5 module. And then I was like, okay, what happens if I ramp it up? And that, you know, like, I'm still wasting bone meal with this design. I'm not getting all of the potential moss blocks out of a single piece of bone meal with this design just yet. We'll get to what I've kind of settled on for my final design at the end. But if I turn this on, it does all the things a moss farm should do, right? Bone meal, wash all the top blocks off, stone generate, break the moss blocks. So the fundamental mechanics are there. now I've kind of got the fundamental mechanics down here of, you know, generate stone, bone meal moss block, wash all of the top parts off, and then generate more stone to break the moss blocks. But realistically, what I want to do is every single time I bone meal, I want to get all of the moss out and compost it. So I want to have a complete sheet of stone before I bone meal again. So this is very much the same design here. But what we have over here, on the other hand, is the design I kind of settled on. So I know there's plenty of other moss farm designs out there. I kind of like to build my own things because I find it to be a technical challenge to try and figure out how it should work and what's the best way of building something. So that's what I've kind of got here. But to get to this, I wanted to take, you know, some inspiration from some pre-existing moss farms. So if I come over here, we have two moss farms over here. This is a pretty popular moss farm designed by Il Mango. It has a lot of crazy redstone going on down here. I know what most of this is doing, but if I turn this on, for example, you can see the farm in action here. Really good, really efficient moss farm. Well, bone meal farm in this case. And then this design over here is by Raiseworks. And this design is actually quite old. This is like a 3-year-old design. But fundamentally, it works really well. And it really follows what I was looking for in, like, you know, getting the max efficiency out of my bone meal. So I come down here, here's the main clock. But here you see stone being generated. Now that all the stone, well, now that all the moss blocks have been broken, then it rebone meals. And this was what I was kind of looking for. And those entities there won't be there long enough for them to despawn. So that's fine. But how does that work? Might be asking yourself, how does that work? So this main clock basically controls the stone generation. But then what it does is it takes a signal from the stone generation and runs it up here into a 2-tick repeater. And then all this repeater does is it pulses this torch, which then locks and unlocks these hoppers. So there is an item in one of these hoppers here. And there are 6 hoppers in total here. And it takes a comparator readout from this hopper. So once this piece of bone meal goes through this hopper and then gets to this hopper, it then triggers this observer, which then does the bone mealing and also opens these trapdoors. and also breaks whatever on top of this moss block. So for every 6 pulses of the stone generator, it bone meals. So once it has 6 pulses, it will then bone meal. Because by that point in time, all of these moss blocks should be broken. And then once it bone meals, it also flushes. So what I've done on my design is I've used this clock and then this idea here of counting these pulses using hoppers. And I've applied that principle essentially to this. So I've kind of compacted this a little bit. So basically, when the clock runs, it sends a signal up and then does the pulse up here. So basically what I have is I have one command unit that deals with all of the timing. So over here, for example, you have, this is all the way up here and the clock's all the way down here. I want one switch, and this farm does run off one switch. It runs completely off this, but I want a module that I can have that's independent of the farming area. Like Ulmango's design over here is it's very compact, it's very efficient, but it's also not simple to build. Like here, for example, we're using activator rails, and then we're zero ticking this observer between 2 pistons. And when that observer powers this block, that's when the bone mealing happens. So I can show you guys that. Yeah, you see? So that gets pulled over there and gets pulled into the middle, which then does the bone mealing. I like this design, but it's a little bit complicated. And we've also got this block that gets pushed up. I think it's that one. Oh no, it's this block here that gets pushed up and then pulled down. And then like this has double piston extenders on it and things like that. And I didn't want that complexity in my farm. So I kind of just took the best ideas and tried to make them my own, you know? And I wasn't 100% sold on this hopper system here, so I was doing some research on the old YouTubes, and here are some counters. These didn't quite work how I expected them to work, so I ended up sticking with this hopper system because it just works. It just works, and it works really well. So up here, yeah, I just have the same clock from the Raceworks farm. I have this hopper setup, which counts the pulses. And I'm taking a comparator output from this one. So once it pulses all the way around, that item's in here. I get a comparator signal out, which extends this observer here, which then triggers my water flushing system, which is just some dispensers with some water buckets in them. Just quick grab some glass, pitch it, hold back up. And then what it also does is that it pushes this observer down here, And I'm using rails and observers just to cut down on some lag, well, potential lag. But you could just run all of these rails could just be redstone lines. So once I get that 6 pulse, boom, boom, and then we fire our bone meal. So then we bone meal the moss block, which generates the moss at the top. Let me just jump in a free cam here. And then what I have above here is a piston. So once we bone meal, then we just fire the piston to break anything on top of this moss block. And yeah, that's kind of pretty much how this all works. And it's quite a nice modular design too. So the way that we're firing the pistons that push the stone this way is that because we've got a target block here, when we fire these pistons here, all I'm doing is I'm just taking a signal from here with a 2-tick delay, a rail, and then some observers coming up, which then is enough delay to then push the stone out into the platform. And then from there, with any other module I add on, I just need to put a repeater here. Same thing with this, and all the way over here too. So I only need these observers here once on each side, basically. And this is a similar modular design as Mango's farm over here. This farm you can also tile, so I could take another one of these and pop it over here, and then I can just run a repeater in between them on these lines, if I remember correctly. But I will leave a link to Mango's video for this farm where he explains it, and also a link to Ray's farm where he talks about this one in the video description, so you guys can go check out those videos if you would like. So back over here to this monstrosity I built. So yeah, basically these modules are essentially the same as what I've got over here. The redstone's just configured differently. So I can just, you know, take this slice and then build another one here, another one there, another one there, another one there. And then I just need to make sure that all of this is connected, that our clock module here can send the signals to where it needs to go, which is just as soon as I send a signal to this first module, I just then just repeat that signal all the way down. So you might be thinking to yourself, cool, that's awesome. But how much bone meal can this farm generate? And I ran some tests yesterday, and here are the results of my testing. So this is 4 modules. So I've got 1 module here, 1 module here, 1 module here, 1 module here. So 4 modules can produce 124 bone meal an hour. Not bad, not bad. But if I add, you know, if I took this whole thing here and added 4 more of them, or 3 more of them on, and I had 16 of just, you know, this little section here, this little quadrant, if I had 16 of them in total, I could generate 4,096 bone meal an hour, which is more than enough to power a bunch of farms. Probably couldn't run all those farms at the same time, but for my needs in my single player world, this is going to produce if I build a 16 module one, that's going to produce enough bone meal to basically power everything I need that is going to require bone meal. What I would recommend though is if you are going to build a moss farm, I would recommend, you know, maybe if you already have a skeleton farm, I would recommend filling all of your dispensers and this hopper completely with bone meal before you start the farm. Because you're going to need bone meal in all of these dispensers anyway. You don't need a lot of bone meal in them because this farm is quite efficient on how it uses bone meal. So it will fill itself up. But if you want to get bone meal, you know, straight off the bat, then you want to fill both your dispenser and your hopper. But yeah, as you can see here, I've got bone meal in here coming on through. And yeah, this is kind of my explanation of how the moss farm works. Obviously, if you don't want to use the moss for bone meal, you could just get rid of these composters and then just feed the output from the platform, you know, just into an array of chests. But I want this for bone meal. And also you probably want to have like 1 or 2 composters anyway. That way you have some bone meal coming out of the system that can feed back into these dispensers, and then you can have the rest of these hopper outputs just outputting all you know, the moss blocks, the moss carpets, the azalea bushes into an array of chests if you wanted to do that. But my reason for creating a moss farm is for bone meal, so I can use it to, you know, fuel a tree farm and things of that nature. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this bad boy on, and I'm just going to show you guys how this works. We'll get this started. Okay, cool. Now you'll see it will go until it breaks all of the moss blocks. Now it will bone meal, and then it will wash the platform clear. And now it will break all of the moss blocks, which is about 6 pushes of the stone generator. Okay, now it's broken all the moss blocks. Now it will bone meal again, and then it will flush the platform. So unlike some of the other designs I have here, where it would bone meal before it broke all of the moss blocks, I'm actually getting the maximum efficiency out of a single piece of bone meal now. Now, having these entities sit here for a little bit is going to cause some lag, but I don't think it's going to be all that much lag. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't really tested that. I'm not entirely sure how I would go about testing that, but at the moment, I'm just more concerned that it's returning me bone meal. So I have all my composters come through here into this dropper, and then the dropper just spits out the bone meal, and then I feed it into, you know, these hoppers, which then refeed the dispensers. So yeah, like that's all full, that's all full. Same on the other side. So none of these dispensers ever run out of bone meal. And then whatever bone meal is left over once it runs over all the dispensers is the bone meal I get to keep. And I can put into another farm. But yeah, it took me quite some time to figure out how to get the most out of the bone meal. And seeing this hopper pulse system, you know. Oh, here's the item. Oh, there it is. Now, it's over here. Oh, it's over there. But basically what happens is there's a bit of redstone in here. That gets pulsed through by unlocking and then locking these hoppers. Yeah. So there's a bit of redstone that gets passed around. And as I said before, like, you don't have to use these rails and observers. This could all be redstone dust. You would have to throw down a repeater every once in a while, but it's my understanding from people that are way smarter than me at redstone that using these powered rails and observer setup creates less lag. But obviously I've still got redstone dust here to power all these target blocks and stuff. But yeah, the farm is completely self-sufficient once it gets going. It might take, like, if you don't have a lot of bone meal to start off with, it might take like 20 minutes to fill up all the dispensers. And then once all the dispensers and the hoppers are full, then a lot of the bone meal that you get is just return and will be in your storage here. So yeah, I hope you guys found this video useful. But this is me doing my best to explain how moss farms kind of work. You know, so hopefully you guys have a little bit more of an understanding of how farming moss and turning it into bone meal, which is what I'm doing in this case, kind of works a little bit better than what you did before. So yeah, if you guys have any suggestions or comments about how, you know, I could improve future videos, which are kind of like this one, you know, just chuck them down in the comments. I really do appreciate any feedback. Any feedback is always good. Yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and a bit of an explanation about how you can farm moss, basically. So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.